Good evening, and welcome to Artist Talk on Art on Monday, January 9th, 2023. I'm Doug Shear, A2A President. This starts our 49th year. We were founded in 1974, and A2A is the art world's longest running and preeminent forum. Our archive resides at Archives of American Art of the Smithsonian, and this month we're adding to our collection there, bringing our A2A archive to more than 1,000 recorded events featuring over 8,500 artists. Comments made by our presenters do not necessarily reflect those of A2A. The event is being captured and delivered via Zoom and is recorded there. That recording will be posted to the Artist Talk on Art YouTube channel in a few days. A2A retains copyright of its recordings. There will be no event on Monday the 16th, which is Martin Luther King holiday, and we have nothing scheduled. Instead, join us here on Monday the 23rd, when I will be interviewing historian, curator, artist, and author Gail Levin, the world-renowned authority on the art and life of Edward Hopper, whose retrospective is currently on view at the Whitney Museum. She and I will discuss the scandal that has arisen concerning 5,000 Hopper objects presented to the Whitney by the family of Reverend Arthur Sanborn, including about 100 paintings heretofore unknown to scholars. Tonight's the presenting artist is Jason Hackenwerth, who will be introduced and assisted by fellow artist Babs Reingold. Babs Reingold, the moderator or interviewer, is a Venezuelan-born American artist who creates sculptures, drawings, and installations focusing on the environment and poverty. Reingold will introduce Hackenwerth and address the audience questions to him, which she will lift from the Zoom chat. She has an extensive showing history, including 16 solo exhibitions and over 75 group exhibitions, ranging from museums, universities, alternative spaces, and galleries. Solo exhibits include New York City, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Savannah, St. Petersburg, Florida, Jersey City, and Buffalo, New York. Museum exhibits include the Newark Museum in New Jersey, the Jersey City Museum, the Albright Knox in Buffalo, Birchfield Penny in Buffalo, the Tampa Museum, and the Museum of Fine Arts of St. Petersburg. She has work in museums and private collections throughout the United States, and museums and private collections that include the Newark Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts, St. Petersburg, Birchfield Penny in Buffalo, Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, and Savannah College of Art and Design. Her awards include a Florida State Fellowship, 2 grants from Pinellas County, guest editor for issue of Arts Journal New Observations, Atlantic Center for Arts Residency, and was a nominee for the Joan Mitchell Fellowship. Reingold has an MFA from SUNY Buffalo and a BFA from the Cleveland Institute of Art. She lives and works in St. Petersburg with a viewing space in New York City. Babs.
Thanks, Doug. And once again, thank you to A2A for hosting this event tonight. And I'm excited and happy to introduce my friend Jason Hackenwerth, who is a multidisciplinary artist working in the fields of painting, sculpture, and installation. His loose and spontaneous paintings begin in response to social, political, and personal issues. The dynamic scenarios that unfold on the painting surfaces are the artist's way of working through his own emotions related to the bombardment of media and life drama. Each painting offers both the struggle and resolution, His work has been exhibited in galleries and museums around the world. Press has included Art Desk, Creative Review UK, American Craft, Design Journal, Art in America, Sculpture Magazine, the New York Times, Creative Review, and London Metro. Jason received his MFA in painting from the Savannah College of Art and Design, where we met. And his Bachelor of Fine Art is in printmaking from Webster University. Jason is also a 2011 Pollock-Krasner Foundation grant recipient and a two-time recipient of the Creative Pinellas Professional Artist Grant. He currently lives and works in St. Petersburg, Florida. So that's his introduction. And as I said, I'm so excited to have Jason here because he's going to do a very interesting, different, unusual presentation tonight. He's going to start off showing you his videos that he puts up on Instagram. And then he's going to work a whole live session and paint away. So we get to see him in action. So Jason, welcome. And I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Babs. It's an honor to be here. And thank everyone for joining tonight. I really appreciate you. And I've scrolled through and seen so many of you on here. And that's really exciting to see you there. I wonder, Natalia, if I might share my screen and I will just give some people a little glimpse at some of the work that I've been doing here in my studio in St. Pete over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's fine. You can share whatever you would like to.
Great. When you'll have to stop your screen share in order for me to share mine.
I'm sorry, I forgot I kept it on this whole time.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share mine now. And then what I'd like to do is just share from my Instagram page. Some of the videos that I'll show will seem quite narrow because of the format that Instagram will place them in the sort of information window that they provide. But I think that you'll be able to get a sense of what's going on. I use Instagram as a marketing tool and as a way of connecting with other artists. Here is a recent video of me working on a larger painting. I don't know why that is happening. Just one moment. Did that switch for you guys? Tell me if, are you able to see my video at this time?
We can see it.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Yes, you're back.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna try this one again. So this is just a canvas drop cloth, and it is a 9x12. I first sort of tape it off on the floor, and then I load it with about 1.5 gallons or so of latex house paint to seal it up, and then work on top of it. Sometimes I drag them outside and work on them outside for days or weeks. Sometimes I hang them up on some posts that I have in the backyard where I can get the drips if I want them. But this gives you an idea of that process. Here's another large canvas. This one is 12 by 15, and it three others this size I exhibited at a solo show this past summer at Creative Pinellas. And this gives you a sense of, you know, the limited size of the studio, but that I'm able to still kind of make it work.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just can you also tell us, do you use the outside when you hang it up to be able to see it so you can see what's going on and where you are?
Not really.
In
That's
terms- Okay.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that question. The reality is, you know, they're very large. It's difficult to see them. Oftentimes, as you saw, I'll be on a ladder looking down on them. or they're on the ground in the backyard, and I don't actually really get to see them until I put them up in a show in a space that's big enough for them. So I'm kind of working blind in so many ways, but I feel like I kind of know what I'm doing and have been doing it long enough that I get a sense of when there's something dynamic and when it's time to stop. What's interesting about the large paintings that doesn't necessarily occur with these smaller ones that are, more human scale, is that it's not easy to just paint it all out and start all over, which in some ways is what you're going to see me do tonight. Instead, I have to really decide, to kind of keep the mark and be satisfied with what I have and not try to constantly be changing it. So a lot of times I post these videos so that they give a glimpse of the process of some of the paintings that are going to be in a show. For instance, this was to promote the opening of a show that I have up currently in Sarasota. And this painting is one that's featured there. And so you get a sense of how I made it. Now I'm just selecting, tiny little 1 second or 2 second clips of the footage that I take while I'm working on these things. And that way the Instagram posts are very dynamic, and it gets people watching, gets people following. And then, it generates a dialogue with other artists who are using Instagram. But, I generally, it doesn't look this dynamic. There's, a half an hour of mixing up the paint, and there's 4 hours of sitting and looking at them and deciding what I'm going to do. And then there's, 7 or 8 minutes of just wild throwing the paint around, and then sit down and look at it and decide, or do a victory dance when it feels like it came together. So tonight should be interesting, since this is going to be a little different than I would normally work. Let's see, here's another one that will show you that this one's currently in a show here in St. Pete.
For that explanation, that's interesting. Something I didn't quite realize about how you work between the difference of seeing between the large versus the more manageable sizes that you can see in the studio. That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's I think that in doing that, it's changed my approach to the more human scale pieces, because I think I've learned to be more courageous just from working on those bigger ones. How about I'll just do one more of these little videos, and then I'll turn on a camera and kind of let her rip. Or maybe if I can get this to start. Here we go. And so you can see there was a painting underneath this. I painted it out, and then I spray painted on it these words, and then this didn't quite work. And so then there was some erasure, and a lot of times I'll use a pigment stick to put some color on, and then in the rubbing of that, it turns into more like a tint, which is very nice. And it's not so opaque. Okay, I think maybe
it's fascinating to see these.
Here's a little clip from Dark Matter, which was the solo show for these giant paintings that I was showing you earlier. I made 4 of them. I wasn't sure what would happen. I just knew that I needed them to fill up this space. And then I was really fortunate that they did sell. 2 of them I actually shipped to a collector in Italy, and others sold to, one's was collected by Savannah College of Art and Design, and another was purchased by a family in Atlanta, which I drove to their home, and I cropped it just a little bit and stretched it on a large frame that I built myself and hung it right in their game room, which was a lot of fun.
That's great.
And I probably have one more video. Here's a little process video of this rack that you guys have been seeing behind me. it gives you a sense that I'm always looking for parts of my process that I can share in order to connect with other artists. You know, it can feel pretty lonely. You know, you come out to the studio by yourself every day, and you know, unless you're in a busy studio building, you're just kind of doing it by yourself, and you don't really have a lot to bounce off of people. But I find when I post something like this, I get a lot of feedback from other people who, you know, will share what the rack looks like that they made, or, you know, ask me questions about that one for whatever they might be trying to do. And I find that to be, you know, really kind of helpful, just to have that connection, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. And you do get a lot of action on Instagram with that, I've noted, the dialogue back and forth. So it's exciting, this thing that you've created on Instagram too.
It's fun. I have a lot of fun with it. I was going to show you this one because it shows you what I did with some canvases that came ripped. They showed up off the truck and they were ripped. So I took some wallpaper and I glued them on there, and then eventually made that painting, which I showed you earlier, the process of making this painting. But here's the process of getting it started, and, you know, just sticking that wallpaper on there so that I could, you know, still use those canvases.
Did they give you any discount for that?
They replaced them, so those were free.
Hey, woohoo!
So, yeah, that worked out. All right, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stop my screen share, and I'll switch from the computer to the phone view. And I'm going to hand that phone to Elizabeth Baroness, and she's going to sort of follow me around, and I'm going to, you know, try to go after some of these paintings that I have sitting around waiting. I've been kind of looking at them all day, trying to decide what I wanted to do, and it was really hard not to go after them around lunchtime. So this will be fun.
They can see this from this camera.
Yeah, so now, okay, can everybody see me?
Should switch their view to speaker view.
Let me see. Hold
I
on.
just turned it up.
Can you guys see or hear me? I'm on mute. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Very clearly.
There we go. There we go. Okay.
View so that this will show up in the video.
Okay.
I'm definitely getting it. I see everything that's happening here.
You want me to get a shot of the paint?
Sure. up here, we got it.
Mhm.
She thinks crossing the legs is fun. She looks down her nose at money. She gets it all like the Easter bunny. She's my baby. My baby. Oh.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Jason, are you using acrylic or are you using oil?
I don't think he's gonna answer.
I don't think you can hear. Maybe not.
We're showing up.
I want to know what kind of paint you used.
This is oil. And I just cut it with some varnish.
Hopefully we can get the answers to your questions after his session, okay?
That would be helpful.
We'll definitely go to that no later than 8 o'clock.
But that one, I look at it and I see this pink line touching right at the top of that sort of almond white at the red, and it flattens it out. And I can't not think of Mirandy when I do that, and I'm breaking the rules. You know, should I rub that out and should I bring that pink line down lower so that it's well inside the almond, or should I keep it right there and, you know, piss everybody off? I say I'm gonna keep it there for today, and then I might get it out. I don't know. Now, this one, I really love this painting. I love it, but something about it doesn't work. I know it doesn't work, and I feel like it's close, but close doesn't matter. So I got an idea of what I want to do to it, and if that doesn't fix it, then I'll probably end up just painting the whole thing out. But here's what I plan to do. We'll see what happens.
Hey, Jason, we got about 15 more minutes for you to paint. Can you hear me? Elizabeth, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Babs, barely.
Can you tell him he's got about 15 more minutes to paint?
15 more minutes to paint.
Maybe 4. This is my last one.
4 minutes.
Not seeing Jason. Doug, is anybody else having problems
I'm
seeing
not,
Jason?
I see him in a small box only at this point.
Okay, can we, Elizabeth? Yeah, you gotta speak after I'm done speaking, so it switches to you.
Ah, right.
Yeah, it's following the active speaker. So whoever is speaking is gonna be on the main screen.
Exactly.
On after we're done speaking. We need to see him. He's painting away and we see nothing.
Uh, Everybody that's individually watching, if you're not seeing him big, try clicking pin, P-I-N.
Turn that music up. Try to hit the mute on that one. And so, is there anybody still here? Did everybody split?
We're still here.
We wouldn't abandon you
We're
at
still
this moment.
here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that just happened.
Uh-huh. So I think it's a free-for-all here to get some questions and comments.
All right, let me just, before you start the free-for-all, can I just address a few comments like we discussed and then let others
Please
go
do.
in?
Please do.
Okay, so first of all, Jason, there were a few people that wanted to know, and I wanted to know as well about sort of the emotions, or what were you thinking when you were working on these pieces? There was also questions about the materials, but can we start, for example, I saw you had the word mortar on there, and I know in your introduction, I talked about the fact that you use sort of the days of events, personal issues, but as well as social political issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then after that, talk a little bit about the materials you're using to create the pieces?
You bet. Yeah, sure, Babs. Thank you for that. I appreciate that question. So as far as what I'm thinking when I write the word, I think that the words come as an impulse for a type of an alliteration. In other words, for me, I'm looking for a kind of a sound. And in this case, it felt like it needed to have this M sound and the consonant TR sound. And so it's very much stream of consciousness. And I try to paint from a place of, if it makes sense, think of quantum physics and how each particle can be in superposition until we observe it, and then it collapses on what we observe. And even then, at subatomic levels, those particles are phasing in and out of this reality, or this dimension, if you will. So I generally try to get myself to a state of superposition, or rather, not thinking. As soon as you start thinking, you start doubting yourself, you start questioning why you're doing things, and you start worrying about how it's going to look, or what that means, or what's that about, or what should I do. I don't want to think about those things. Instead, I want to draw on all of the years of experience looking at other people's art and looking at my own art. And I have an encyclopedia of painters up here who I steal from or draw from, and I'm not trying to make any one painting look like any of those things, but all of that is guiding me in an unconscious way. And so as far as what the word means, for me, it's not so much about being a word, it's about line and form. And so they're a formal element of lines and shapes. And depending on whether it's a script writing or whether it's block letters or just regular standard letters, those have a different kind of line feel, and they have a different kind of an energy. And so a lot of times the music that I'm listening to might push my impulse to one type of mark over another, if that makes any sense. Maybe they're less lyrical and they're more bombastic, or they're more aggressive, or more biting. And so in this case, the word mortar can have many meanings. I like to think of it as a building material rather than a bomb, but both of those certainly are pregnant, in this painting. So I would prefer to leave it to the viewer to decide what that's about. My job is just to decide what color should that line and mark be, and how will that color respond to the colors that are already there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna interrupt for 1 second and ask Natalie, can we unpin him so that when he's speaking, Jason is large on the screen, or however you're videotaping this for future viewing?
Are we stuck on the other? Are we stuck on the other?
Yeah, we are. I mean, we can leave it on your painting, but I
There we
kind
go.
of,
Yeah.
when we start to get into this discussion, I'd rather it go to
Yeah, that's better.
who's speaking, to whom is.
I didn't know how to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and now, that was an interesting answer, an unexpected answer, and a good answer. So let me also pull in a couple of the questions here, because I also talked about the idea of the materials. A few people were asking, is it acrylic? What material are you using? Are you using oil? Do you have oil sticks? I know in some of your paintings you use spray paint. You have a bunch of different mediums that you put together. So could you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, for sure. So mostly it's oil. Mostly it's Utrecht or Utrecht, however you like to pronounce it. And sometimes there's some gambling, but it's a bucket of oils, and then I cut it with some kind of a liquid, whether it's varnish or poly or something like that, to get the consistency I want, so I can get those drips, or I can make it like a pudding or whatever. Then the pigment sticks are generally oil as well, and you can paint back over those with oil. I on those bigger paintings, I'll use latex and I'll use acrylic, so it'll dry much faster because they're so huge. And then instead of putting oil sticks on those, I'll use tempera sticks, which dry almost immediately. But of course they can wash off, which is good, because you can scrub them and make them look faded and so on. But then if it's at a restaurant or something like that and it gets some spaghetti sauce on it, somebody might accidentally clean off the painting. So there's, it's give and take. You got to decide what you're going to do. And but in this case, all of this stuff is oil-based material.
Okay. Then there was also a question about the layering and the covering up, even when you've covered things up. And I think you kind of answered this. Is it about the experience? As you're layering, does the layering add to the experience? Is my interpretation of the question. Or is it simply that you decided you don't want to see that anymore and you're moving on to the next thing, and you're in your unconscious mode and you're just going?
I don't think you're far off there. Yes, certainly. Sometimes when I'm, painting something over, I might have started with some concept that's very painful, or, full of rage for, the choice that they made on the Supreme Court or whatever. It might be something very, just personal that I'm trying to deal with. And so there's this catharsis to, erase that or cover that up. But I think it's not so much thought out in that way, but it's just allowing my body and the brush to just do what it wants to do, and then look at it until it feels like something is unlocked, or until it starts to become dynamic enough that I can walk away from it and feel like I'll be pleased when I come back tomorrow and I'm in the more analytical mind.
So now I'm going to switch a little bit over to how you got to be doing this versus what you were doing for a number of years. Because I think it would be interesting for people to understand how you got from doing these giant sculptures, these balloon sculptures. And of course, when I met you, you were painting back in the early 2000s, and you left grad school and then you moved to New York and you started doing these balloon pieces. And it's interesting because you've melted the two in a way together. They're two very different things, but the shapes I see in the sculptures are the same kind of shapes I'm seeing in the paintings. And the marks aren't like what you would think necessarily, but some of that's in there too. So can you talk a little bit about that shift and what was the impetus behind that shift? And if you feel like that this is really allowing you, I guess I'm seeing it as really allowing you to express yourself so much more than when you're doing the balloon sculptures, or am I wrong?
I think you're right about that, Babs, and thanks for asking. I just clicked to screen share, and this is my website that's running, just to go through a few slides of sculptures that I've made over the years. So yeah, I left grad school with a degree in painting, and I got to New York City and I became very desperate. I had friends who were showing paintings and I was showing paintings and getting some project room shows, but once in a while you sell a painting for a couple $1,000s, and that's nothing compared to the $35,000 a year in rent that you're paying and so on. So I was quite desperate, and I started, just taking balloons into the subway late at night, early in the morning, and started sticking them around. Just because I felt miserable in a way. I felt stuck, and it looked like everybody that I saw, where when I would be going to work, to the gallery, whatever, it felt like everybody was just sort of in zombie mode, going to work and going home from work, and we all sort of got trapped doing this thing when we really had these dreams. So I started going in the subway using balloons because I thought it would be very joyful and interesting for people to see, and maybe it would provide some relief. And then it just sort of took off. I showed that to a friend at the Scope Art Fair, right when Scope Art Fair first began. He thought that was very interesting and let me make an installation of those at the Scope Art Fair in London, the first year they did London. And I ended up, for one reason or another, eventually making a sculpture with those at that fair. And when I got home to New York, I was receiving offers already. And over the year of 2005, I graduated 2003, and by January of 2005, I was already flying around the world making sculptures with latex balloons, and I didn't have any time to go to my studio and make paintings. I might be home for a week or two, and that's just not enough time to be in the studio for any length of time and really develop a body of work. So I kind of abandoned painting on accident because I was lucky and busy, and I was actually earning a living. And so I got very lucky, and I traveled the world for a couple of decades, but then knew that I wanted to slow down because I wanted to have a family. So I got married. We bought a house in St. Pete and built this studio out here so that I didn't have to travel. But the plan was to transition and become a painter, as I had always planned to be. But I knew that I would have to invent myself again, and that I would have to figure out how to make paintings and how to make that connect, and then get a gallery or some galleries and start getting it out there. Now, does the work relate? Well, I think that it comes from the same place. I always felt that my sculptures were informed by all of the painters that I loved. And I think that all of those sculptures, in many ways for me were kind of like three-dimensional paintings, and I approached them that way. But you're right, to be out here and make these, you can see it's very explosive and expressive, and it's so dynamic and so fast. And that's not that way with the sculptures. There's a lot of planning, and then it's this tedious work that takes days and weeks. But then, as you saw, those sculptures are quite remarkable. So now I'm at a point in my career where I feel like I'm on a precipice of really getting this work to connect and reach a much larger audience, and then to start to provide an income for my family. But now I have two components. So I can, as you saw earlier, I can make a giant show in a museum with huge sculpture as sort of an anchor for the show. And then I can fill up other rooms and the walls with the paintings. And hopefully that will be an easier way to bring a steady flow of income, and not rely on flying around the world all of the time in order to, go from one project to the next just to keep ends meeting,
Can you, can you talk a little bit then also about how you suddenly, because your painting was very different. In fact, my husband and I, we bought a little painting of Jason's at his MFA thesis show at the end of his MFA upon graduation, and then he immediately went up to New York, and so it's very different. And what's happened, as I see it, is that the making the balloons and the action of the balloons have now transferred to the actions and the colors of the painting. The paintings and the balloons have, they've come together now that you took, because you didn't have that before. Before you were making paintings. And I can see the colors are very much the things that you've been using in the balloons.
Absolutely.
And can you talk also a little bit about your color choices?
I think that at that time, when you saw those works in my thesis show, I was really afraid of color. I had been kicked out of the painting department in my undergrad, and so I had to switch my emphasis to printmaking, and and I sort of fell in love with the blacks and whites, and I fell in love with some browns and these really deep, dark tones. And then I never really explored color until I started working with those sculptures, and I was looking for joy in my life. And so I think a lot of that work and a lot of those, those muted tones from the earlier stuff really had to do with where I was spiritually as a person, and, still dealing with a lot of baggage that I hadn't processed in my life. And I think that, those sculptures certainly informed my color sensibility, and now, had sort of opened up a gateway to these kinds of color choices that I make today. And primarily with the pink, I consider the pink almost a feminist statement. Not almost, I won't apologize for it. I believe that the pink is a feminist statement. And, we were taught, starting in the 50s, they used pink and blue to sort of separate boys and girls. And in the 80s, we were told, real men don't wear pink, which is a load of crap. And, you don't see a lot of pink. Now it's changing slowly now. We're starting to see that shift. But pink has always been this color that, men associated that with femininity, or even more worse than that, as weakness, which I reject. And so there's almost a there's almost a paradox here for me, because on one hand, I want to say, pink is not a feminine color. That's absurd. But on the other hand, I want to say, but if it is a feminine color, it's the strongest color there is, and we should rejoice in that. And so in that way, I think it is a feminist statement.
There is a question here, which is a straightforward one, is do you know a balloon artist in Dublin by the name of Abramson? Just
I know.
okay. And
I'm sorry.
so I'm going to go back to my questions, because
I'll
I
just
always
say,
have lots of questions.
I'm not a balloon artist.
I
I've never
know.
considered myself a balloon artist. There are people out there who call themselves that, but I've always just wanted to make paintings and sculptures. And so when people say, oh, you're a balloon artist, I'll let you say that. I won't correct you. But the reality is that's just limiting people's perception of the kinds of statements that I'm able to make with my work. And so, I'm not a balloon artist. I'm just an artist. And there are people who are balloon artists, and the things that they make, in my opinion, are very limited. And I don't mean that as disrespectful at all. I just don't think that there's as much poetry there as what I've always endeavored to make with the abstract forms that I make. So I hope nobody's offended by that statement. I just wanted to make that distinction.
I understand it. I think I recall you saying this once before. And at this point, it looks to me like also, as we're having this dialogue, you're pinned, so only you are speaking and no one ever sees the questioner, me. I don't know if that's good or bad for the video, but that's the way it looks like it's happened.
You can do
I
split
don't
screen.
know if Doug, you have any questions? Something about Doug is asking, it's been blown out of proportion.
I'm the one that made the balloon comment, that's why.
Oh, okay,
And then you said blown
okay.
out of proportion.
Oh,
Was that-
all right, okay,
Forgive me for my bad puns.
okay,
Um,
Doug, thank you.
All
But
right, I'm a
I was
dad
gonna
too.
say,
We're
I
adding some,
discovered-
we're adding some humor now, all right.
right, I've discovered
well,
though that you can click on the image of the person that it's maybe talking and you want to see them larger. If you click pin in that box, it will then blow up and be the dominant screen. So try it.
I understand that. What I was concerned that for the video, that's the final video that we go and all you ever see is Jason on the screen the whole time. If that's okay with you, that's fine
Yeah,
by
I mean,
me.
it's fine. It's fine. I have
Okay.
the light pink, I have pink shirts, you know.
Yeah, and this way we see his pink shirt all the time. I can definitely change it to speaker, mode. And we see.
I can see, one question that I wanted to, or a comment I wanted to make was, I see in your work, and I told you earlier, there are influences of Basquiat, of Guston, of Rivers, of Cause. You know, they're all in there, and others, but certainly that. But that's irrelevant. What's relevant is how you uniquely blend all those things and make it your own personality and make it your own statement, and you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And I also see in a broader way that in many ways, you're an Abex painter,
Right.
but at the same time, you're also a graffiti artist. You're also like making tags and, using spray cans.
Well, and I appreciate you noting that. And I feel like, I was raised on the Abex movement in the 80s. But of course, at that same time, Basquiat was stealing the show. People didn't really discover him until later, although he was the king even then. But now I feel like all of that vocabulary is fodder for work today. And my body of work, I intend for it to just be sort of to build on all of that and be a continuation of that dialogue and to be, speaking to all of those heroes of mine with it.
Right. Well, don't you have a sense that none of that stuff ever went away?
I agree.
Here we are, we're like in the 80th or 85th year or whatever of Abex.
Yeah.
And it's strong as ever. If anything, it's making
Jonathan Lasker's still making
major renaissance,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it very much reminded me of the movie where Basquiat and Warhol are working together. And you see him going at it and he puts some marks down and then Andy comes over and puts some marks down where they were working on those pieces together. They're on the floor and marks you're making very much reminded me of marks that Basquiat was making in that particular documentary where they were filming them, which was interesting too. But you don't have anything that looks like his. It just.
Well, I get a lot of people saying that. And one of the things is because I use those oil stick and a lot of the marks are very linear. And so that immediately makes you think of his work because he was such a genius with that and so prolific with that mark. And so we automatically go to that. But, for me, there's Schnabel there and there's Cy Twombly there and there's Anselm Kiefer there. And so all of those marks are there and Larry Rivers as well. Doug, thank you. And even Ed Ruscha, depending on how I've written those words and even, a lot of the stuff that you saw, like you said, Babs, that's graffiti, and so everything, it's very pluralistic time. There's no limit. You can put it all together. Why not?
Right. I think part of your secret sauce, let me call it, is marks on your marks on your marks on your marks, and erasing and smudging and making more marks and then extending some of the original marks, or wiping out whole sections, and then it's infusing It's bleeding colors into other colors and infusing things that are sort of radically, inappropriate, but they then, become totally appropriate.
Right.
So
Just
I'm
really thank you for
I'm
your
really
work.
digging it.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks.
Yeah.
I agree, Doug. It's and it's uniquely yours. I mean, we all steal. Everybody steals from everybody else. I mean, what came before is all a part of our repertoire. Now, they've got some more questions coming in. I will tell you that also right at the very beginning, Elisa Pritzker made a comment about how she admires your sharing with us and your fearless way of painting. And that leads me to ask you, were you, when you came in tonight, is this part of how you normally work, or does this feel very strange to you to do it in front of the camera for us? Because obviously, like you said, it's a very solitary thing, and it's quite another thing to do. Essentially, you were doing a performance for us.
Yeah.
And how is that related to when you actually paint? Do you ever think of that at all when you're painting? I would imagine not, but I'll ask that question, especially after Elisa noted it's such a private thing to make work and you're letting people in, but social media has also fueled all of this. And you have built that with the persona that you put on social media, but that's different. You've edited it, you've made it, it isn't live. You didn't do it right here, right now. So I'll let you answer that. And then there's a couple of other little thoughts here.
Yeah,
that I'll read.
It's not exactly how I would generally work, and generally not at this time of night. Usually I'm putting my kids to bed right now. I have 7-year-old twins. But more than that, to have someone in the studio. So Elizabeth is here, she was working the camera. And so I was more aware, more cognizant that there was an audience, where in general, I might know that I'm about to work on a painting. So I'll set up the tripod and I'll capture the whole process. And after I'm finished getting what I'm going to get, I'll turn it off and I'll finish doing what I'm going to do. And then when I'm working on another one, I'll get it again. And at the end of the day, I'll go through and look at everything I got, and I'll take 2 seconds of this and 2 seconds of that and make something that's very dynamic, that looks like a music video, so that I can capture people's attention on Instagram, which then gets the work out there. But in the process, something is lost in doing that. There's a seriousness that I think might be lost in that process, but I've traded that for the time being in order to build this Instagram community or this Instagram following. And I do try to share very generously. Oftentimes what I've recorded, I look back and, once I've turned off the camera, I see, oh, well, there's one more thing I need to do, and I go do it. And that's the thing that ties the whole painting together. And a lot of times I don't have that. And I wish that I did, but then I think, well, it doesn't even matter. I'm just making a commercial. These are all just little commercials for my process. And eventually I'll probably stop doing that. And they'll just be, the gallery will show, the painting that they want to show at, for whatever. But for now, it works. But yes, it's definitely awkward to have an audience at 7 o'clock at night and someone in the studio following me around with a camera. But I will say that being able to turn on the music and then just get into it, that's pretty normal. And so, in many ways, I think that it worked just as it would have otherwise. Maybe I was more brave because I was willing to be wild and crazy just to show off for all of you. So thanks for that.
That works. Now, there is a question about the balloon sculptures, which of course I know the answer, but you can answer this. Do they perish with time? What happens to them? Can you talk a little bit about that for the audience?
Yes, the sculptures are ephemeral. They're made from latex balloons, and the latex is a biodegradable natural material that comes from trees. So they generally last, they stay very shiny and robust for about a month, which is about the length of a show. If it's going to be in a museum, they might be 3 months long, and then they begin to change slightly. A more interesting time frame is 5 months, because then you really start to see them become saggy and droopy and very strange, and they start to fall apart in some ways. And I find that to be as interesting as when they're really fresh and beautiful and robust and shiny. But that in between, you know, if you can visit them as they shrivel, there are some really strange stages of them. But then when they're all done, in fact, I'm working with my sister-in-law now, who's she's a PhD at USF in biology and chemistry, and we're composting my sculptures from dark matter, and I have 2 compost boxes, and we're testing the soil of one that's the control with no latex, and we're testing one that has the balloons in it. They biodegrade about as fast as an oak leaf. And in a couple of years, we'll test that soil to see what's the presence of latex in the soil. And then we'll grow tomatoes. And then we'll test the tomatoes with the control soil and the latex soil to see if there's any residue of latex in the tomatoes, which will be fascinating, but it's a 3 to 4 year study. So it's going to be quite a while. And then once I'm finished with that, you know, she'll write a white paper on that, which will be very interesting to read.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's a very interesting project you've got going on. Because we've had long discussions about the whole biodegradable and the environment. And in a way, you mentioned to me a while back about it being one of the factors where people were misunderstanding that these are not the kind of balloons that were really adding to the environment. So now you're truly taking it to the next level.
I'm trying to, but
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
still go out and kill turtles, but I have to swim down there and choke them myself.
Well, I will I'll say there are so many things that we all do that it's impossible. This idea that we're going to not work with materials that are going to somehow add to the environment is a pretty hard thing to do if you're doing anything involving painting. But even materials that I think are not add. And the last thing I'll say about that real quick is just that plastic is everywhere. It's like we think we're going to avoid it, but it's in every item we buy in the store, every bottle, everything is packaged that way. Some of the other things is you had a lot of great comments in the chat. I don't know if you're seeing them. But Suzanne Williamson said she just loved the live paintings session and your thoughts on your work. And another one said, Jason, have you done and attempted doing tall, high projects like Matisse? And I think you already mentioned that you take them out in the yard and hang them. I think what was the height of those paintings? I mean, they were huge at the show. So yes, those projects, those pieces are really big.
Yeah,
And you were on the ladder painting, but you were also, you said you hung them up outside so that you could see them, and you paint on them out there too.
Yeah, I had to make 10-foot long paintbrushes for those.
I like your paintbrushes too. I like the way you make your paintbrushes with the sticks and put the brushes at the end.
That really
Jason,
helps, you know. Sometimes I'm right up close and it doesn't make a big difference, but other times when I need to get away, you know, it's really helpful to have them there and just be used to using them that way.
Right.
And yeah, it makes a big difference, honestly.
And your control, do you feel like you still have the same kind of control? Because the control's got to be different.
Well,
way to
certainly the control is probably different, but it's the way I've always painted. So it's just how I know to use them. And
Okay.
And the last thing I want really is too much control. I mean, you saw how I'm flinging it around. You know, it's, you know, I'm just used to it. Those were a suggestion of my painting instructor, who was 66 years old, and he was an abstract expressionist from the 50s, who was my teacher in the 80s for undergrad. And so he was always talking about putting your brushes on a long stick, and, you know, and then yelling at us to put on more paint and more color. And he didn't even look at us. He just shouted that. His name was Jack Canepa. Jack Canepa, yeah, and he made a lot of color field paintings and a lot of flag paintings and things like that. But he kicked me out because I started drawing and writing on my canvases, and he wouldn't allow words in his paintings, and he wouldn't allow drawing. He said, "You're making drawings, and if you keep it up, you're out." And I did, and so he kicked me out. So that was the end of my painting in undergrad.
That's fascinating. In undergrad too, I also had a painter that well, didn't kick me out. No one ever kicked me out of anything. But I was so fascinated by how quickly he painted. And it was the first time I was seeing somebody who was painting with acrylics. I ended up, all my paintings were in oil, but he was painting in acrylics, and I liked the speed with which he paints. And you have that speed to your painting as well. And so when I was asking you the question about, is it the same? Is the pace the same for your performance that you just gave us? Or because in your videos, they all look very fast as well.
The only difference is that I wouldn't have mixed up all of the paint for all 3 paintings. I would have mixed up the paint and worked on one, and then cleaned those brushes and cleaned all of that mess, and then mixed up the next set of paints and worked on the next one, and so on. But in this case, I had it all prepared in advance. I had these canvases, which I knew I was going to punch. And
Right.
so I just did them all 1, 2, 3.
It makes me think of de Kooning, how they would talk about how he would make one mark and then shuffle back. I saw some documentary where he would shuffle back, and then he'd sit there probably for an hour and study and look at that one mark before he went and put on another mark. And when you look at these final paintings on a lot of these Abex guys, you don't think that's the way the paint went down. There's that assumption of the rapid painting. And this artist, his name was Ken Navadomi, who would, I mean, I couldn't believe how fast this guy would paint. And he was fabulous. It was just, and it was not abstract, it was figurative. And he would do these whole settings and everything, and it was just fast. And he'd throw the brushes into a big bucket of water, and you just imagine you're like an 18-year-old, and you come in and you go, whoa, okay. It's this whole introduction of how somebody works. So it is fascinating to, I just love this idea. This was Doug's idea to get us into a live session, and each artist paints so differently, works so differently. And so it was fascinating to see you share this. We have a couple of more things here. How do you feel about where the paintings are now? I don't know if this person means the paintings that you just worked on, or if you mean in general, because you and I have talked while you have been in this process. I've watched this process of you taking your paintings and how your paintings have changed before my eyes as you've been working on these over the last, what is it, about 3 years you've been doing this project, switching to painting now? Would you say?
Summer of 2019. Yeah, summer of 2019, I started in here, and pretty much every day since.
Yeah. The paintings right now is the question from, I don't know who Slacker Poser's big phone is, but that's who the question is from.
That's Kate Cummins, and she's a remarkable painter right here in Pinellas County as well, and a recent grantee from the Pinellas, Prix de Pinellas.
Okay.
How do I feel about him? I don't know. I'm excited about it, but I feel like it's not there. I'm probably going to go back with some more black after the yellow and black one. But I need to look at the one on the floor a little bit, because there's some things about it that I really like, but laying on the floor, I can't tell. So typically that'll be a conversation with myself in the morning over coffee. As I mentioned, I'll come back with an analytical mind later and kind of decide, where the chips fell and whether I have to go back again.
Okay.
I think this is a good moment for me to jump in here. Babs says she's never been thrown out of anything. And I would add, until tonight.
Oh, stop.
I'm teasing you, Babs.
I know.
So I want to, but seriously, I'd like to thank both of you. Thank Jason and Babs for this wonderful and I think very spontaneous event. And Jason, you're a great sport to be our first victim in this new concept that we're trying. But I think it's a great one. I'm very happy that we decided to do it. And I'd like to thank our twin programming coordinators, Therese Chen and Abby Herman, as well as our programming committee, and our board of advisors and directors and numerous volunteers. And a reminder again, save the date, January 23rd, when we come back, and when I'll be interviewing Gail Levin, who is the #1 authority on Edward Hopper, had been the Whitney Museum curator of the Hopper collection starting in 1976, who is taking on the Whitney, which is no small task, over the inclusion of the Sanborn collection and the scandal that has arisen thereof. So don't miss that on January 23rd. Again, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Babs. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that, Doug. Thank you very much. Thank you,
You're
Babs.
Thank you for doing this, Jason. It was most appreciated. I was looking forward to this, and as Doug said, thank you for being our guinea pig to the first one to try this.
Right.
And I think it worked well. And I can see a couple things over the course of this where we say, now's the time to pin this person, now's the time to unpin this person. You know, that's the painter and doing this so that we can get it. But it was a lot of fun. I'm glad
It
you
was an honor.
said yes
I was
to
honored to
this.
be the guinea pig. Thanks for that.
We're delighted you did. Thank you very much.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
All right, good night.